In this video, I'm going to explain how to write a strong and persuasive academic claim. And by academic, I just mean writing it in the kind of formal way we expect to see in an argument essay. Now, if you remember from the last video, my introduction to claims, a claim is just a statement that can be argued and proven with evidence. Remember, it needs those three things: to be a statement or a complete sentence, or maybe two sentences. It needs to be something you can argue about, and also it needs to be something you can use evidence to prove. And strong claims, if you remember, have these following qualities. It's a statement, or a full sentence, or maybe two sentences. It's not obvious. It's not just your personal opinion about something. It's specific, so it's not too general. It's something you can argue for or possibly against. And lastly, you can support it with evidence. Now let's focus on writing a claim. And you need to do two things for this. First, you need to restate the question, which really just means putting it in a different way. And then secondly, you need to summarize briefly the reason behind your claim. Let's look at a couple of examples. So in this first example, we have the issue of students using cell phones in class. And a claim you can make about this is students should not be allowed to use their phones in class because it distracts them. And you'll notice here that the part in blue is where I've restated my claim, and the part in green is just my reason. Let's look at another example. This is the example of metal detectors at school, or scanning. The question is, should students have to go through metal detectors at school? And the claim could be something like, due to privacy concerns, students should not have to go through metal detectors. And here I put it the other way around. So actually in green is where I put my reason, due to privacy concerns, and in blue is where I've restated my question. And there are lots of ways in which we can do this. Let's look at the question of, should graffiti be allowed? And this is a picture of a place called 5 Points, which used to be in Long Island City in Queens until about 5 years ago, and then it got demolished. But this whole building, it was an old warehouse. It was covered with graffiti, some really cool graffiti, like you can see in one of the buildings here on the screen. So if we're thinking about this question, there are lots of claims we can make to address the issue of whether graffiti should be allowed. And there's lots of different ways of doing it. Let's look at some. So in the first one here, graffiti should be allowed because it beautifies or makes beautiful the urban environment. So in blue here, I've restated the question, and then in green is where I've given my reason. Here's another example. Since graffiti promotes crime, it should not be allowed. In green again is my reason, and then in blue is where I've restated the question. Another way of doing it is to say due to its use, or due to. Its use as a form of social protest, graffiti should be allowed. Another way, you could just say graffiti is illegal and a form of vandalism, that's my reason, and therefore should not be allowed. And that's where I put in my restating of the question. Another way, graffiti is a vibrant form of public art and should be allowed, very similar to the previous example. Again, I've started with my reason, and then I've just added a little bit at the end to restate the question. And then this example, public tagging or making graffiti purely for fame is just narcissism. For this reason, graffiti should not be allowed. Again, at the end here, I've actually put it as a separate sentence. I've actually put my restating of the question as a separate sentence. And then lastly, in view of the fact that graffiti is a form of self-expression, it should be allowed. All these are perfectly acceptable ways of making an academic claim. So your job is to think about this question, should babies be genetically engineered? And today's assignment is to think about how you could put that in an academic way. So I want you to think about using one of the methods on the screen here. Using because or since, due to, as a result of, in light of the fact, for this reason, in view of, using any of those starters or sentence starters to restate the question and to add your reason. The Padlet looks like this. Again, you're answering the question, should babies be genetically engineered? Now, you've already answered this question if you remember from assignment 3.1 on Monday. Question 6 was actually this very question. Should babies be genetically modified? And you all wrote some really great answers to that. But when you write it in this Padlet, I want you to rewrite whatever you wrote for that question in an academic way using some of the methods I've just shown. So let's look at my example. Okay, so here CRISPR, the main technology involved in gene editing, is irreversible. For this reason, babies should not be genetically modified. So I've started off with my reason. I've actually put that as a separate sentence, and then I've restated the question in the second sentence. For this reason, babies should not be genetically modified. Remember when you're doing this Padlet to write your full name as the title. We're actually going to be using this Padlet and adding to it throughout the unit. So this is just part 1, making your claim.